Stop.
Yo, what's up, everybody? I'm Marcus,
All right.
and together we
We're
are
the
the Northwest Sports Fanatics. Back at you guys with a new video, of course, presented by Rip City Beat, and now got PJ out there.
The Beat.
What's up, PJ? Today we want to go over the Northwest Sports Fanatics top 10 fantasy football players.
Right. So this is how you want to get your draft started off on the right foot. There is a right way and a wrong way to draft. So we are going to give you some guidance so that way you can win the championship belt at the end of the fantasy season.
Hey, we did a lot of work, a lot of video watching, a lot of reading. So let's get right to our top 10.
All right. So let's start off with number 10.
Number 10, we have Mr. Jordan Howard from the Chicago Bears, 6'1", 222, second year out of Indiana.
All right. So this running back from last year was a rookie standout, probably the most surprising rookie altogether in 2016.
Yep.
252 attempts, 1,313 yards, nice 5.2 average. So he can definitely run the rock. 6 TDs, and I expect that to grow, maybe into double digits this year.
Well, when you look at the Bears, when you look at their offense, I mean,
They're garbage.
exactly. Last year, Mr. Howard, he had 11 games over 9 points. He averaged 18 touches a game and over 107 total yards per game last year. So expect that to increase in his workload due to the fact that the Bears have who?
Nobody.
Okay, so expect this workload to increase a little bit
Right.
this year.
So you got Trubisky and you got, Glenn in there, but you don't really have a lot of weapons. We don't know what Kevin White's going to do. But for running backs, it's very important in the first round, second round, third, fourth round to load up on as many as you can, because not only are you going to get fantasy points with them running the rock averages for yardage over 100 yards, the touchdowns, but if you get a back that can catch out of the backfield, that's some extra fantasy points as you move forward.
All right, so there you have it. Number 10. Let's go to number 9.
All right, one of my favorite players at number 9, LaShawn McCoy.
LaShawn McCoy, he's going into his 8th year out of Pitt. 5'10", 215 pounds. Of course, he's up in Buffalo for the Bills.
Right. So AKA Shady McCoy, 2016 season, 234 attempts, 1,267 yards, 5.4 average, and a nice, cool 13 TDs for LaShawn McCoy.
LaShawn McCoy, he's 29 years old, and he's not showing signs of slowing down. He has a 4.7 yard per carry for his career,
Right.
which is 10th in NFL history. He averaged 5.4 last year, like you said. If he can do 3 more years of 1,100 yards and 48 receptions per year, that will put him over 12,000 yards rushing for his career, 500 catches, Hall of Fame.
Absolutely.
Only 4 other running backs have done that, and you have to go LaDainian Tomlinson, LT, Marcus Allen, Emmitt Smith, and Marshall Faulk, and all 4 of those running backs are in the hall.
Right, great company. And LaShawn McCoy is usually pretty steady as long as he doesn't have a big significant injury. You can pretty much count on him getting you fantasy points every week.
Yep.
And the nice thing is he's pretty good hands. He can actually catch out of the backfield and get you, maybe a touchdown or 2 in the season receiving. But a very nice pick, depending on how big your league is, 10-man, 12-man.
Yep.
Getting your first pick started off with LaShawn McCoy if you draft a little bit late, like 9th, 10th. That's a great way to start.
All right, so let's go to our number 8 player.
Number 8, we have AJ Green.
AJ Green, 6'4", 211, out of Georgia. 6-time Pro Bowler. Of course, he's out there in Cincinnati for the Bengals.
Right. So we missed some time last year, 2016 season, 66 receptions, a little low for him, 964 yards, 14.6 average, only 4 TDs. But like we were talking earlier, I believe he missed 6 games last year. So that probably would have been closer to the 8 to 10 range, maybe slightly higher if he would have played in those games last year.
Yeah, he'd averaged 96 yards per game. But like you said, he missed 6. If you equate that to over 16, that's probably what 1,500 yards, over 10 TDs.
Right.
They got him a little bit of help, Mr. John Ross out of Washington, get him the blow the top off the defense, and also a healthy Tyler Eifert should definitely help out Mr. AJ Green and give you some fantasy production.
Right. So the only problem with him is the kind of the injury factor, with
Right.
a lot of these taller wide receivers. Can they stay healthy? But if you're picking in the first round and you want to go for a guy that should give you good points, I would say for at least guaranteed 3/4 of the season with maybe a couple games missed, AJ Green would be a great way to start off your fantasy draft this year.
All right, that's number 8. Now let's go to number Sam.
All right. Number 7, we're going to go with a player that's probably one of my pretty much favorites in this whole top 10, Devontae Freeman.
Wow, Mr. Devontae Freeman, 5'9", 209, his third year out of Florida State. And of course, he run that rock for the Dirty Birds, the Atlanta Falcons.
Right. Let them do the Super Bowl, even though they did lose to the Patriots in that game. 227 attempts last year, 1,079 yards, 4.8 average, 11 TDs rushing, 2 receiving TDs. He can do it all. And he's one of those guys in fantasy. He will give you at least 3 TDs, at least once or twice, more than likely in the season this year.
I like what you said, that he can do it all. In contrast to those 1,100 yards rushing, 10 TDs, he did had 54 reception, 462 yards. In fantasy, it's all about building points, and he adds value that he could also do a receiving as well. He ranked second in the NFL red zone in red zone touches with 62. And out of those 62, he got 17 targets in the passing game. Even with Julio there, Freeman is going to definitely get his chance once they get inside that red zone, inside the 20, to put up points for you.
Right.
And also, he produces.
Right. And Freeman is probably the second best two-way player who can kind of catch and run the rock in the whole NFL at running back. I mean, he's really a guy that you can depend on, pretty steady, should give you some good fantasy points. So if you have to start with him, and you have to draft somewhere between 5th and 10th, that'd be a great way to start off, just to kind of kick off your running backs and get some good fantasy points to get you that championship.
All right, so there you have it, number 5, Mr. Devontae Freeman. And let's go to number 6.
All right, number 6, my guy from the Tampa Bay Bucks, Mike Evans.
Mr. Mike Evans, 6'5", 231, fourth year out of Texas A&M. Wow. And of course, like you said, he's for the Buccaneers,
Right. So
Tampa Bay.
right. So I don't want to cause a little drama, but he's starting to creep up to be arguably one of the best tall wide receivers, creeping up on Julio. He's getting there. 2016 stats: 96 receptions, 1,321 yards, 13.8 average, 12 TDs, targeted number 1 in the NFL last year from Jameis Winston 173 times. Won't get targeted that much this year with Deshaun Jackson, OJ Howard, and a lot of the other weapons. But this guy would be a great way to start off your fantasy lineup. Guy that's going to produce for you week in and week out. And he will be able to give you a couple multiple touchdown games this season, guaranteed.
Now, Mike Evans is the 4th wide receiver in NFL history to start his career with 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. What a great accomplishment, especially to get 1,000 yards as a rookie.
Right.
And then he's done it consistently over the next 2 years. He had a decent fantasy year. His first 8 games last year, he averaged 15 points a game. The last 8, only 12. I say only 12, but that's still
still good though. Yeah.
And in addition to Djax, like you said, Howard, maybe when Doug get back, you got Mr. Brait, who I like also.
Right.
I expect this production to maybe increase a little bit more. And that 12 TDs in 2 of his last 3 seasons, hey, you can't go wrong with picking Mr. Michael Evans.
Right. So Jameis is obviously improving this year. The stats are going to go up. I feel he's going to have more yards and more TDs. So I think it is definitely possible for him to reach 12, but
Right.
maybe even get a little bit higher and get closer to maybe that 14, 15 range if everything goes well, obviously barring any serious injuries to Jameis Winston.
All right, there you have it. Number 6, Mr. Mike Evans. We're going to the top 5 now. Now time to get to the heavy hitters.
Right.
And that number 5, who we got?
We got arguably the tallest wide receiver that has the most game, the most accolades. Who are we talking about? From the Dirty Birds, Julio Jones.
Mr. Julio Jones, 6'3", 220, out of Alabama, his 7th year. And of course, he flying down south with the Dirty Birds as well, the Atlanta Falcons.
Right. So obviously we got two Falcons here in the top seven, 83 receptions, 1,409 yards, 17-yard average per catch, 6 TDs, which is a little low for Julio.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
would assume that he'll get closer to that double-digit touchdown range, especially being Matt Ryan's number one target.
So Julio Jones, 4 1,000 yard seasons in his career, 4 Pro Bowls, 3 time All Pro. The thing that I like about Julio is last year he had 679 yards after the catch,
Right. Unbelievable.
which is first in the NFL, and he gives it to you every game. He's averaging a solid 96 yards per game.
Right. So it all depends if you're in a PPR league, or points per reception, or if you're in a standard league. But obviously, drafting Julio in the first round, no one's going to shake your head and, make fun of you for that. Obviously, the only
Right.
kind of downside between Julio and AJ Green is just can they stay healthy?
Injuries.
Right. For that whole season. Because I know a lot of people in fantasy lost in the championship or in the playoffs based
Right.
off Julio's injury at the end of the year, obviously last year. But a great way to start. And the Falcons, even though off that Super Bowl kind of hang up, that kind of down year that typical teams have after going to the Super Bowl, we'll have to wait and see if they can keep it up. But Julio is going to get you points week in and week out.
All right, so there you have it. Number 5, Mr. Julio Jones. Let's go to number 4 in our top 10 fantasy.
Right. So number 4 and number 3 can be definitely interchangeable. This guy's got the best hands in the NFL, hands down. 2 hands, 1 hand, 1 finger, 3 fingers. It doesn't matter. We're talking about Odell Beckham Jr.
Mr. Odell Beckham, 5'11", 198 out of LSU, going into his 4th year, and he's up top playing for the New York Football Giants.
Right. So you got Brandon Marshall on the other side. Should be very exciting for them. And Eli, 101 receptions, 1,367 yards, a 13.5 average per catch, 10 TDs. He's almost money for double-digit touchdowns almost every season. He's durable. He's going to get you points. And he is one of those guys that can get you more than 1 touchdown in a game. And he can break away, obviously getting a 5-yard slant to the house for extra fantasy points.
And he's playing on a kind of a prove it his last year of his contract.
Right.
So he wants some big bucks.
Right.
3 straight years for OBJ of 91 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 TDs. Wow, that's consistency. With the addition, of course, of Mr. Brandon Marshall on the outside, they brought in Evan Ingram at tight end to give him some help up the middle. I expect another year from Mr. OBJ.
Right. They need to do something like trade for Jeremy Hill and get themselves a running back in there. You know what I mean? Because that's the one little kind of slow spot there. But what does that mean for Brandon Marshall and Odell Beckham? More catches, more targets, and more fantasy points to win you a championship.
Don't forget about Mr. Russell Shepard in the slot.
Yeah,
well.
I like him a lot too. Yeah.
All right, so that's number 4, Odell Beckham Jr. Let's go to number 3.
Number 3, the best wide receiver, hands down, in the league, even though some people like Julio and Odell Beckham. Sorry to say, it is Antonio Brown.
Mr. Antonio Brown, 5'10", 180 in his 8th year from Central Michigan.
Right, 2016, 106 receptions, 1,284 yards, 12.1 average per catch, 12 TDs. This guy can do it all. He's the big reason that the Steelers are contenders pretty much year in and year out with Big Ben.
All right, and he has the accolades to back that up too. 5-time Pro Bowler, 3 times All Pro, and if you're looking for fantasy numbers, 10 plus points in 70% of his games over the last 4 years.
Right. So if you draft 1, 2, or 3, and depending on if you want to go running back or wide receiver,
right,
no one is going to shake their head at getting Antonio Brown because he is going to be consistent. He's durable. He's going to play more than likely all the games throughout the year. Knock on wood.
Yep.
And he's going to get you a lot of fantasy points. And he's just like Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, AJ Green. There is a lot of chances for more than 1 touchdown in the, obviously each game this season. I mean, there's going to be some games where, I don't know, maybe two touchdowns, 3 touchdowns,
oh, yeah.
maybe 4 touchdowns. I mean, you never know.
Just no twerking.
No twerking.
He averages 11 targets per game, plus with Martavius Bryant back to give him some help on the other end. So hopefully that production will go up a little bit for all of the fantasy owners who draft him.
Right. So top 3, if you have top 3 pick, Antonio Brown, definitely go after him if you're sitting there.
Yes, sir. All right, so number 3, Antonio Brown. Let's go to number 2.
All right, number 2, another guy from the Steelers. We have a little problems with this player not coming into camp yet. You're trying to get a little bit more dollars and cheddar. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Le'Veon Bell.
We're talking about Mr. Le'Veon Bell, 6'2", 230 out of Michigan State, going into his fifth year, and he plays for the black and yellow, the
Yeah.
Pittsburgh
Yeah,
Steelers.
just like Wiz Khalifa said, the black and yellow, 261 attempts, 1,268 yards, 4.9 average, 7 TDs on the ground, 2 TDs receiving, only played 12 games. So,
Wow.
I mean, that's pretty good stats. I mean, obviously, with 4 more games under his belt, he more than likely would have had 10 to 12 TDs and maybe an extra receiving touchdown. We just need to get his ass there. Get his ass there.
Get the camp,
Get to
man.
camp, because what this means is this is a risky pick. This is probably the
Exactly.
most risky pick in the top 10, just because we don't know what his kind of health is at this point. And
Mhm.
if you're not in camp and you're not playing in these preseason games, more than likely that's going to lead to an injury. Now,
Exactly.
how big of an injury,
Knock
we
on
don't
wood.
know, but more than likely he is not going to play all 16 games. So if you're okay with that and you can keep drafting well behind him, you may, if you go Le'Veon Bell in the top three, make sure you pick up a nice solid, maybe trying to think of who would be a nice fit on Cleveland Browns.
A little Crowell.
Yeah, Isaiah Crowell, and there's a couple other guys that you could
Some
probably
a little help for
a
him
little
in
help
the back.
behind him. Jay Ajayi,
Right.
you're going to need someone behind him just in case he gets injured. But when he's on the field, he is unbelievable for fantasy.
Yeah, like you said, 9 TDs in 12 games. He finished third in the NFL in yards from scrimmage. 12 games, he had over 1,900 total yards. He had that one beast game when he went for 236, 3 touchdowns against the Bills. I believe it was in the snow.
Right.
That was a huge game. But when I think of his situation and running backs holding out, I go all the way back to Chris Johnson, CJ2K,
Okay.
coming off the big year, and he held out for a contract, and then he came back and he hurt his hamstring, and he just wasn't the same ever since.
Right. Le'Veon Bell, a little bit more talented than CJ2K, but gosh, because it's going to be the difference between, hey, can he get you, 20 points in fantasy, get you 3 touchdowns,
Right.
or is he going to, end up getting a hamstring pull or Achilles, some kind of injury?
Sad, man.
But this is the riskiest pick. So be very careful if you're drafting in the top three and Le'Veon Bell's still sitting there. You
Mhm.
may want to go for one of these top end wide receivers instead, or you may want to actually go for our number one guy, who is the best overall player in this fantasy draft that we have right now.
And at number one, who we have?
Number one, we have the best player in the fantasy draft. No questions, no worries about picking this player. This guy has really come on strong in the last few years. I know you thought about maybe drafting him in the
Man,
last couple years, but we've been kind of sleeping on
I
him.
know I have.
Right? Who are we talking about? We're talking about the number one pick, David Johnson.
Mr. David Johnson, 6'1", 224, from Northern Iowa. He's going into his third year with the Arizona
Right.
Cardinals.
Check these stats out. 2016 season, 293 attempts, so it's a little heavy. 1,239 yards, 4.2 average, 16 TDs. He's
Wow.
averaging a TD a freaking game, right? And on top of that, 4 TDs receiving, and he's done that in back-to-back seasons. So this guy is kind of like a Devontae Freeman, but
Mhm.
just on another level. I mean, he's
Mhm.
just juiced up. You know what I mean? He's going to be durable. He's going to play in all the games more than likely. They don't have a lot of weapons that are young. Obviously, Larry Fitzgerald's getting a
Getting
little bit
older.
older,
Right.
so they love to hand the rock off. And he's going to be able to give you good production. Doesn't fumble a lot either, so you don't have to worry about losing fantasy points based off the fumbles.
Yep.
But if you're sitting at the number one pick, and if you're just so lucky that you have it, you better grab David Johnson. I know it's not a name like a Des Bryant or
Mhm.
some of these other bigger Adrian Peterson in the past, where it's
Right.
like, okay, I know the name recognition, but that's not about fantasy football. It's not about name recognition. It's about the guys that are going to give you the stats on the ground,
Mhm.
and the guys that can catch out of the backfield, and guys that are going to give you freaking points, right? Fantasy points.
That's
That's
what
what
it's
it's
about.
about.
Fantasy points. You're
Right,
right.
right. You want to be able to get, 10 points minimum, but with David Johnson, shoot, I mean, you might be able to get 20, 25, 30,
Sometimes 30. Yep.
right, in a few of these games. And that could really help you out, especially if you have a weak tight end or maybe a weak kicker or weak defense. He
Mhm.
can kind of hold the load for you. You're going to want to make sure that you double up on another running back if you do get him, or maybe one of the wide receivers that's left. But you're definitely going to want to grab him if you're sitting in the number one position in fantasy.
Mr. David Johnson, one Pro Bowl, one All Pro appearance so far in his young career. He averages 23 touches a game. That's a reason why you want to get him, because
Right.
you know he's going to get the attempts. He had, like you said, 2,113 total yards last year, kick return, catching, rushing. He does it all. And Arians has came out and said he averaged 23 last year. We're going to try to get him 30 this year.
Right. And he's got good size, good speed. He can break tackles. He's a machine. You know,
Yes.
I don't really see him slowing down. And I know, for some of these sport people out here, you're like, who the hell is David Johnson? Right. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people, they don't know. But if you actually just go through the tape, look at the stats, look at fantasy and how fantasy is really kind of played out depending on if you're PPR league, standard league, this guy is going to be very valuable. It's almost like if you're going to compare it to like a quarterback, as valuable as a Aaron Rodgers or a Tom Brady, someone that's going to give you points week in and week out. And chances are he's not going to get injured because he is pretty durable, takes care of his body. And if you have him, that's going to lead you off at that number one pick to kind of get yourself a nice cushion as you go into the second round, and then either double up with another running back. Maybe Melvin Gordon afterwards if he's still available. Jay Ajayi. There's a lot of nice picks this year that are going to be on the come up. And like Zeke Elliott, even though, with the whole suspension thing, we didn't mention him in the top 10. Now, if he didn't have the suspension, he definitely would be in our top 10. So that might be someone that, is a little, I wouldn't say necessarily a sleeper, because you're not going to be able to use him until, well, we're going to have to say, they said 6 games originally, but that'll get reduced more than likely. Maybe four, maybe 3, but he's still going to be someone you're going to want to look at. And that'd be a great, I would say maybe second round, third round. If he's still sitting there, just put him on your bench and then you can stash him away, and then you can obviously move forward with him. But definitely stock up on running backs. And just kind of a key for fantasy football, don't pick a quarterback in the first round, right? Don't go for Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady. The draft is deep. Right. You can go running back, wide receiver, tight end. You can just load up until you get to about the 5th to 9th round. And then you can still find a good Kirk Cousins, Jameis Winston.
Right.
There's going to be guys there that are going to get you points.
Mariota.
Right. Because then if you go for an Aaron Rodgers early, you're going to be left with like Lamar Miller at running back, and you're going to be scratching your head. Latavius Murray. You're gonna be losing against a lot of the opponents you play in fantasy just because you overdrafted. You reached for a player that other guys might have drafted maybe second, third round, but
second, third round.
Right, right. But you always get that one knucklehead, that always screws things up.
Starts to run.
Right,
drafting quarterbacks.
Right.
Like, oh.
And then you get pressured to draft a quarterback because they start drafting quarterbacks, or they go for like a defense in the first round, just doing something stupid. You know what I mean? So make sure you go running back and wide receiver heavy. And then you're going to want to make sure that you get a good tight end within the first, I would say, somewhere between the 4th and 7th round.
Some good ones out there.
Right, because after Gronk goes, you know what I mean?
Gronk going first 2 rounds. So.
Yeah, he'll be gone. But, there's Travis Kelce, Martellus Bennett. There's going to be some pieces
Jordan
there.
Reed,
right? Jordan Reed. Maybe OJ Howard. Maybe gets a little bit of look. So make sure you draft well. And it's going to be one of those things in the fantasy draft, how you draft and how you kind of complete your bench week in and week out. That's what really helps you win a fantasy championship. So don't think you can play your standard lineup that you draft the whole season and make it all the way to the championship and win. I mean, it's possible. If you
it can happen.
It can happen. Right. But the teams that typically win, if you look at fantasy champions, you got to build that roster from top to bottom. And make sure you don't sleep on a defense. You're going to want to make sure you get a defense somewhere between, I would say, maybe 4th to 7th round, especially if like a Denver is sitting there, Seattle, you're going to want to scoop them up, because just like quarterbacks, once that first defense goes, Houston, then all the others start. Cardinals. There's going to be some good ones, but especially Denver D. That would be one that you might want to swoop up in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Even though there might be a tight end that would be maybe a better fit, but defense gets you a lot of points, especially in fantasy. Right. So if you have a shitty defense that ends up, that and kicker, right? Tight end. Those are kind of the reasons you lose week in and week out. Shitty kicker, shitty defense, right? Right.
Yeah, kickers are important too, man. They can win you a lot of games.
Right.
They can also lose you some as well.
Right. Absolutely.
All right. So there you guys have it. The Northwest Sports Fanatics Fantasy Top 10 Players. We'll be back at you guys real soon. We need to do some type of NFL preview video.
Yeah, we'll do that. I mean, we got college football coming next week already.
Yeah, so. I'm excited. There you guys have it. I'm Marcus. This is Orion. Only got one question for you. Who talk sports like us?
Northwest Sports Fanatics.